I never imagined my life would fall apart on a quiet Tuesday morning. I was 47 years old, exhausted from years of working long shifts in logistics, the kind of job that wears you down slowly, in places no one can see. My wife, Melissa, used to say she missed the man I used to be, the one who still smiled, who still had time, who still believed life had something better waiting around the corner. I didn't know it then, but the truth was far darker. She didn't miss me. She had simply grown tired of me. And what happened next would expose a kind of betrayal I didn't think was possible. The day everything changed started with pain. Not emotional pain, not stress, but a ripping sensation inside my chest that stole the air from my lungs. I remember clutching the kitchen counter, the world spinning around me, the ceramic tiles blurring as my knees hit the floor. I tried to call her name, but my voice broke halfway. Melissa was in the living room, scrolling on her phone, annoyed that she had to pause her show when she finally walked over. When she saw me collapsing, she didn't scream or panic. She didn't kneel beside me. She froze, just for a moment, and then quietly said, "You scared me." Nothing more. No rush to help. No urgency in her voice. She just stood there until the paramedics burst through the door minutes later. I barely remember the ambulance ride. Everything was a haze of sirens, colors, and fear. I only recall the ceiling lights passing above me and a paramedic's voice saying, "Stay with us, sir." I was drifting in and out of consciousness, thinking of my daughters, thinking of all the times I promised I'd be there to walk them down the aisle, thinking of how little I'd lived for myself. Then the world went black. When I woke up, I was in a hospital room, cold, unfamiliar, full of machines that beeped like they were counting down something I couldn't see. Tubes in my arms, wires across my chest. A doctor explained it was a cardiac arrest. They weren't sure if I'd make it the first 48 hours. I tried to speak, tried to ask about Melissa, about whether she was there, but the doctor looked at me with a softness I've never forgotten. "She stepped out," he said, carefully, "but she'll be back." Except she didn't come back. Not that day, not the next, not even the week after. The nurses saw the look on my face each time medication dulled my thoughts long enough for me to ask again. They kept checking the visitor list, and each time they'd return with the same quiet expression, awkward, sad, like they wanted to say something but knew it wasn't their place. I felt time slipping between my fingers as my body fought to recover, and my heart struggled to understand why the woman I spent 17 years with had disappeared without warning. She told them all. I lost him. He didn't make it. He's gone. She planned a life without me before the doctors even confirmed if I'd survive. When the social worker showed me hospital documentation with notes about her statement, when I saw how she had informed the staff of my death to avoid updates or responsibilities, I felt my blood turn to ice. And then came the final blow. She had already started selling my things, our home office, my tools, even the ring my father left me before he passed, all gone, all listed online. She didn't even have the dignity to wait until the machine stopped beeping. I wasn't just abandoned, I was erased. And the cruelest part, no one knew I was alive, because the only person who should have cared told them I wasn't. The day they finally discharged me, weeks later, I stood outside the hospital feeling like a ghost in my own life. I didn't know what I'd find when I returned home. I didn't know if Melissa was there, or if she'd completely emptied the house. I didn't know what I'd do when I saw her again. I only knew one thing. She believed I was gone. She built a life without me. And now, I was walking back into a world where I shouldn't exist. What happened when I opened that door? The way she reacted. The truth I discovered in that house. It would shatter everything I knew about betrayal, love, and justice. When I finally stepped outside the hospital, the cold morning air hit my face like a reminder that the world had continued without me. I was thinner, weaker, moving slower than a man my age should. Every breath felt heavy, as if I were inhaling the weight of everything that had been taken from me. I held the small plastic hospital bag with the clothes I'd arrived in, staring at it as if it belonged to someone else. Getting a taxi felt unreal. I hadn't been outside in weeks, and now I was heading back to a home that might not even feel like home anymore. As the driver talked about traffic and rising gas prices, I barely heard him. My thoughts kept circling the same fear. What would I walk into? Would Melissa pretend to be shocked, like she had just seen a ghost? Or would she panic because her lie had finally walked back into her life? The closer we got to my street, the tighter my chest felt, not from the heart attack, but from dread. I pressed my hand against my thigh to stop it from shaking, telling myself quietly, "Whatever you see, you survived worse." When the taxi turned the corner, my heart hit my ribs. My house, our house, looked unfamiliar, like it belonged to strangers. Decorations I didn't recognize were hanging by the window, and the garden I used to take care of was overgrown. It felt like time had passed in a world I wasn't supposed to return to. I paid the driver, stepped out slowly, and just stared for a moment. This was my life, I whispered. My life. And yet, I felt like an intruder approaching someone else's front door. The walk up the driveway was the longest walk of my life. Every step echoed with the memories of the last time I left this place, barely conscious, fighting for my life, being carried out by paramedics, while Melissa stood there with the same blank face someone gives a stranger. I grabbed the doorknob expecting it to be locked, but it wasn't. That alone was unsettling. I pushed the door open, and the old wooden hinges creaked louder than I remembered, as if announcing something heavy and wrong. For a moment, I just stood there, holding my breath, waiting for the house to tell me what had changed. Inside, the air felt different, colder, emptier, and yet somehow messier. Furniture was moved, pictures were taken down, and new decorations I'd never seen were scattered around. The smell was different too, as if someone else had been living there comfortably in my absence. I walked deeper inside and whispered, "Melissa?" Not because I wanted her, but because I needed to see her face when she realized her dead husband was standing in front of her. I heard footsteps upstairs, quick ones, like someone panicking. And then her voice came down the hallway, shaken and angry. "Who's in the house?" I froze when I heard her voice. It wasn't the voice of a grieving wife. It wasn't even the voice of someone surprised. It was the voice of someone terrified of being caught. Her footsteps moved closer, each one heavier than the last, and for a moment I saw the shadow of her silhouette stretch across the hallway wall. My heart was pounding so hard it echoed in my ears, but I stood completely still. When she finally stepped into view at the bottom of the stairs, her eyes locked onto mine, and it was like watching a person's soul leave their body. Her face went pale instantly. Her lips parted without sound, and she shook her head as if trying to erase the image in front of her. She grabbed the railing to steady herself, whispering, "No, no, this can't be real." It wasn't the reaction of a woman who was relieved her husband was alive. It was the reaction of someone whose entire lie had just collapsed. She looked at me like I was a ghost that had crawled out of the grave she dug for me. You're supposed to be," she stuttered, unable to finish the sentence. I took a slow step forward and said, calmly, "Dead. Yeah, I've heard." Her breath hitched, and she backed up a step, clutching the railing harder, like she expected me to disappear again. But I didn't disappear. I was right there, standing in the house she had already started replacing me in. She tried to regain control of the situation, straightening her posture and wiping her tears almost angrily. Why didn't anyone call me? Why didn't the hospital? Why didn't they? She searched for excuses, but each word fell flat. I watched her scramble like someone who had just been caught stealing, not grieving. And then I said something that shut her up completely. "They tried to call you." Her eyes widened, And I continued. Multiple times. You told them you couldn't see me like that. Her face trembled, and for a moment I saw something, guilt or fear. I couldn't tell. Maybe both. I walked past her into the living room, scanning the changes she made while I was fighting for my life. My recliner was gone, my bookshelves replaced. Even the family photos, our wedding picture, our vacations, birthdays, were removed, leaving blank spaces on the wall where my life used to hang. I turned toward her and asked quietly, "Were you planning to erase everything? Or was I the only thing you needed gone?" The silence that followed felt heavier than the heart attack itself. Melissa swallowed hard, her voice trembling as she muttered, "You don't understand what I went through." But the truth was, I understood perfectly. She didn't go through anything. She ran. Then I noticed something that made my stomach twist. Men's shoes by the door. Not mine. New ones. Expensive. Larger. And next to them, a jacket draped over the chair, one I had never seen before. A fresh wave of cold ran through me. I looked back at her slowly, and she knew exactly what I was seeing. Her eyes darted away, her jaw tightening. "It's not what you think," she murmured, but she couldn't even say it with confidence. I took a step closer to the shoes, feeling every piece of my old life crumble under the weight of this new betrayal. "How long?" I asked. "How long before you even waited to replace me?" She closed her eyes, and her silence was my answer. Before she could come up with another excuse, I heard movement upstairs. Slow, heavy steps, a man's footsteps. Melissa's face drained completely, and she whispered, "Please, don't go up there." But it was too late. The sound alone told me everything I needed to know, yet some part of me needed to see it, to face it, because only then would I finally understand the depth of what she had done. I took a deep breath, turned toward the stairs, and began climbing, feeling her panic rise behind me like a shadow. Whatever I was about to find at the top, it would mark the end of a life I once thought was real. As I climbed the stairs, each step felt heavier than the last, not because of my weak body, but because I could feel the truth pulsing through the air like static. Melissa's breathless pleading followed behind me. "Please, stop. Please don't go up there." But her voice only made everything clearer. Guilty people beg for control, not forgiveness. My hand tightened on the railing as I reached the top, feeling a faint tremor in my chest. Not from fear, but from the final stage of disbelief turning into certainty. Whatever I found behind those doors would erase every last piece of the man I used to be. The hallway felt narrower than I remembered, as if the walls themselves had witnessed things I never wanted to imagine. Then I saw him, a man I had never seen before, standing in my bedroom doorway. He was tall, maybe early 40s, with short dark hair, wearing nothing but jeans, and looking more surprised than ashamed. For a second, we simply stared at each other. It wasn't anger that hit me first. It was something deeper, colder, realization. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't sneaking. He belonged there, in the room I once shared with my wife. And that truth landed like a punch to my already fragile chest. Behind me, Melissa rushed up the stairs, breathless and panicked, whispering, "Please, just listen. I can explain." But the man in the doorway didn't move. He didn't even try to leave. He just watched me with that uncomfortable mix of confidence and discomfort. The look of someone who wasn't sorry for what he did, just sorry he got caught. I could feel my breathing quicken, but I steadied myself against the doorframe and said quietly, "Explain what, exactly? That you told everyone I was dead so you wouldn't have to deal with me, or that you replaced me before my heart even healed?" Melissa's eyes filled with tears, but they looked forced, like she was trying to summon sympathy she had long since used up. The man finally spoke, his voice low but steady. "Look, I didn't know the whole situation. She told me you two were separated weeks before the incident." His words were sharp, cutting through the last illusion I might have held onto. Separated. She hadn't even visited me once after the heart attack. Now I knew why. She wasn't alone. She had moved on, created a new truth, and buried me in it. Melissa stepped forward, reaching for my arm, but I pulled away. Her touch felt foreign, cold, like she had already touched another life with the same hands. "I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered. "But you were fading. And I didn't know how to handle it." Something inside me snapped, not with rage, but with clarity. This wasn't about fear or confusion. This was convenience. She didn't want a husband who needed care, or time, or patience. She wanted an escape, and my heart attack had given her the perfect opportunity. I looked into our bedroom, my bedroom, and saw details that confirmed everything. A second toothbrush, men's cologne, clothes scattered casually, a phone charger on my side of the bed. It wasn't temporary. This was his place now. I felt something inside me shut down completely, like a door closing forever. I took one long breath, the kind you take before stepping out of a burning building, and turned to face them both. "You erased me," I said quietly. "You didn't just replace me. You didn't even wait." Melissa's tears fell, but her silence spoke louder. The man crossed his arms, clearly uncomfortable now, and muttered, "Maybe we should give him space." But Melissa shook her head, desperate to regain control. "You have to understand," she said, voice cracking. "I thought you wouldn't make it. I didn't know what to do. I panicked." But the panic didn't explain the shoes by the door, the empty fridge she never restocked, the life she built in the shadow of a lie. I stood in that doorway for a moment, letting the truth sink in completely. The marriage I had been fighting for was already gone long before my heart stopped beating. That room, once full of memories, arguments, laughter, and broken promises, now felt like a stranger's home. I looked at Melissa one last time, her face trembling, mascara smudged, hands shaking as she whispered, almost pleading, "Please, say something." And for the first time in weeks, I realized I finally could. I stepped back, straightened my posture, and said, "I survived, but whatever this is, didn't." I didn't wait for Melissa to respond. I walked past her slowly, feeling the weight of her eyes on my back like someone watching their world collapse. I could hear her soft, broken whisper, "Please, don't leave." But it didn't land the way she hoped. For years, I had believed her tears, believed her pain, believed that we were two people trying to survive life together. But now, her voice felt like an echo in a room that no longer belonged to either of us. I stepped down the stairs carefully, steadying myself on the railing as a dull ache spread through my chest, reminding me that I wasn't fully healed. Not physically, not emotionally, not in any way a person should be after returning from the dead. Downstairs, the house felt even more foreign than it had minutes earlier. I stood by the front door, looking at the empty hooks where my coats once hung, the missing picture frames that used to hold our family memories, the quiet spaces where laughter no longer lived. For a brief moment, I felt a sting behind my eyes, grief not for Melissa, but for the man I used to be in this house. A man who believed loyalty meant safety, a man who thought marriage meant certainty. That man had died in the hospital, even if my body hadn't. I placed my hand on the door, preparing to leave, when I heard her footsteps rushing down the stairs. "Please," she cried, breathless. "You can't just walk away after everything we've been through." I turned to face her, and for the first time since stepping inside, I truly looked at her. Not as the woman I married, but as the woman who had walked away the moment life got complicated. Her hair was messy, her makeup smeared, her hands trembling, not from remorse, but from fear of losing the stability she built on top of a lie. "Everything we've been through," I repeated quietly. "You told people I was dead, Melissa. You didn't visit once. Not once." She lifted her hands defensively, desperately searching for some angle to justify her choices. "I couldn't handle seeing you like that," she said, voice cracking. "I thought you would hate me for giving up. I thought it would be easier." But I cut her off gently, not with anger, but with clarity. "Easier for who?" She didn't answer. Her silence was the answer. I felt a strange calm settle over me, a calm that came not from forgiveness, but from acceptance. I realized then that I didn't need revenge. I didn't need explanations, and I didn't need closure from her. I simply needed to walk out of the life that had already ended without me. I opened the door slowly, the cool air brushing against my face, as if welcoming me back into a world that still had room for me. Melissa reached out instinctively, grabbing the edge of my jacket, her voice cracking into something raw and trembling. "Please, don't go. We can fix this. We can figure this out. I need you." I walked for nearly 20 minutes before finally stopping at a small bench near the corner store. The same one Melissa and I used to pass on evening walks back when things still felt simple. My chest felt tight again, but not in the dangerous way, more like my body was finally processing everything at once. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, trying to steady my breathing. Part of me wanted to scream, part of me wanted to cry, and another part of me simply felt empty. That kind of emptiness that comes after surviving a storm you never saw coming. I didn't know where to go, what to do, or who to call, until a name flashed in my mind, someone I hadn't thought about in weeks. Claire, my best friend Daniel's sister. She was one of the few people who had visited me regularly before the heart attack, always dropping off meals, texting to check in, reminding me to take breaks and not to burn myself out. She had always been kind, sincere, the kind of person who notices when you're hurting even before you do. In the hospital, when Melissa didn't show up, one of the nurses mentioned that someone named Claire had called 3 times asking for updates. At the time, I barely processed it. Now, sitting alone on that bench, her name felt like a lifeline. She didn't know I was alive. No one did. Melissa had silenced everything. I reached into my pocket for my phone, still cracked from the fall during my heart attack, and hesitated before calling. When she answered, her voice hit me like sunlight breaking through clouds. She sounded rushed, worried, breathless. "Hello, is everything okay?" I didn't know what to say at first. I just sat there, holding the phone, listening to her breathe. Then I managed, "Hey, it's me." There was a sharp inhale on the other end, followed by stunned silence. "Me?" she repeated softly, confusion turning into something else. "Wait, is this... Are you... They told me. Daniel told me. Everyone told me you didn't make it." Her voice cracked on the last word, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. I felt my throat tighten as I whispered, "I'm alive. I made it. But everything's different now." She didn't ask questions right away. Instead, she said the words I didn't know I needed. "Tell me where you are. I'm coming to get you." No hesitation. No doubt. No fear. Just pure human concern. I gave her the crossroads nearest to the bench, and she told me to stay put, repeating, "Don't move. I'm on my way." When the call ended, I stared at the street, feeling something strange rise in my chest. Relief. Not joy, not yet, but relief that someone still cared enough to show up. After everything I had just walked away from, that feeling alone was enough to steady the ground beneath my feet again. 10 minutes later, her car pulled up, braking a little too quickly like she was afraid I might disappear if she arrived a second too late. She jumped out before the engine fully settled and rushed toward me. When she saw me, pale, thinner, wounded, her hand flew to her mouth, and her eyes filled instantly. "Oh my God, you're really here," she said, voice trembling. I managed a faint smile, but it faded quickly. She reached out carefully, as if worried I might break, and then wrapped her arms around me in a hug that felt warmer than anything I'd felt in months. I didn't realize how much I needed that moment until I felt myself exhale into her shoulder, like my body finally understood it was safe. She pulled back slowly, wiping her cheeks, scanning my face like she was checking for fractures. "Let's get you out of the cold," she said softly, guiding me toward the passenger seat. As I sat down, she noticed the hospital bracelet still around my wrist. Her expression darkened, not with pity, but with anger. "She didn't tell anyone," she said quietly, staring straight ahead. "Not your family, not Daniel, not me. Nothing. We all thought—" She swallowed, unable to finish the sentence. I nodded weakly and whispered, "She wanted it that way." Claire's grip tightened on the wheel as she pulled away from the curb, her voice low and fierce. "Well, she doesn't get to decide the rest of your story." Claire drove me to her place, a small, warm apartment that felt more like a home than the house I had just walked out of. She sat me at the kitchen table, made tea, and kept glancing at me like she was afraid I'd vanish again. "You're safe here," she said softly, and for the first time in months, I believed those words. Over the next weeks, she helped me schedule appointments, make meals, regain strength, and slowly rebuild the parts of myself that Melissa had abandoned. We talked late into the nights, sometimes laughing, sometimes falling into quiet moments that felt heavier than friendship. But she never rushed anything. She just stayed. And sometimes, staying is the greatest kind of love. As the months passed, my health improved. My energy returned. My chest stopped aching every time I breathed. I got back to my work projects, reconnected with Daniel, and even began taking morning walks with Claire, who always showed up with coffee and that soft smile that somehow made life feel manageable again. Then, one morning, everything shifted. A mutual friend called Claire, whispering, "She knows. She found out you're alive." Melissa had overheard a conversation, learned I had survived, and apparently learned something else too. I was doing well. Very well. Enough for her to come running. 2 days later, Claire opened her front door and froze. Melissa was standing there, holding flowers and wearing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Is he here?" she asked sweetly, like she hadn't erased me from her life. Claire didn't have time to respond before I stepped into view. Melissa's smile vanished instantly. You look good," she said awkwardly. "Better than I expected." She swallowed hard and added, "I wanted to apologize. I made mistakes, but I never stopped loving you." The lie hung in the air like smoke. Behind her eyes wasn't love, it was panic. Panic that I had risen without her. Panic that her replacement life wasn't as stable as she hoped. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I didn't even let anger rise. I just held her gaze and said calmly, "You didn't visit me once." She blinked, but I continued. "You didn't call. You didn't check. You moved on before I even woke up." Her shoulders dropped, but she tried again, stepping closer. "We can rebuild this. We can start over." And that's when I stepped aside. Because behind me, walking into view, was Claire, steady, calm, the person who rode out the storm with me when everyone else disappeared. When Melissa saw her, her face drained completely. She whispered, "No, not her." But it was too late. The truth was standing right there. "I didn't lose you," I said quietly. "You let me go." Melissa's eyes filled with disbelief, then anger, then something like regret. But the wrong kind. The type that appears only when consequences show up. She opened her mouth to speak, but I gently shook my head. "I survived, Melissa. Just not for you." Claire didn't gloat, didn't smirk. She simply stood beside me with the calm strength that had carried me through recovery. Melissa stepped back slowly, as if the ground had moved beneath her. I really messed up, she whispered. I nodded once. Yes, but that's your story to fix, not mine. She left without another word. And for the first time, I closed a door without feeling like anything valuable was left behind it. That night, Claire sat next to me on her couch, her hand finding mine without hesitation. And in that quiet moment, I understood something important. Sometimes life breaks you in the exact places where something stronger is meant to grow. She looked at me and whispered, "You deserve someone who shows up." And I finally believed her. From that day forward, we built a new life, not rushed, not forced, but real. A life made from honesty, not fear, presence, not abandonment. And as I looked at Claire, I realized I hadn't just survived a heart attack. I had survived a loveless life. And this time, I chose someone who chose me right back. Sometimes the people who leave you in your darkest moment teach you exactly what kind of love you should never accept again. And sometimes, the people who show up quietly become the ones who help rebuild everything you lost. If you want to see another powerful story about family, betrayal, and redemption, tap on the video to your left. It's about the son whose father removed him from the will while he was in a coma, and how 5 years later, the father came back begging for help, only to discover his son had built a multi-million-dollar empire without him.